Why museums keep some masterpieces in the dark. Imagine walking into a museum. The room is quiet. A masterpiece hangs on the wall, carefully protected behind glass. You can see every detail. The colors seem beautiful. The surface looks almost alive. But there is something you may not notice. The museum is controlling the light. The room may be much darker than you expect. The painting may be exposed to only a small amount of light each day.
Why?
Because light can destroy art. We normally think of light as something that allows us to see. But for many works of art, light is also a slow and invisible form of damage. It can fade pigments, change colors, break down paper fibers, weaken textiles, and alter photographs. The strange thing is that the damage can happen so slowly that we may not notice it until years have passed. A painting may look exactly the same today, but after decades of exposure, its colors can become noticeably different. And once certain pigments have faded, they cannot simply be brought back. This is why museums treat light almost like a powerful chemical. They measure it, control it, filter it, and sometimes they turn it off completely. One of the most important factors is ultraviolet radiation. Ultraviolet light contains more energy than visible light and can contribute to chemical changes in many materials. But visible light can also cause damage. That means simply putting a masterpiece under ordinary gallery lighting is not necessarily harmless. Museums, therefore, have to balance two competing responsibilities. Visitors need enough light to see the artwork, but the artwork needs protection from too much light. This becomes especially difficult with works made from fragile materials. Watercolors are a famous example. The artist may have used delicate pigments on paper. The paper itself can also deteriorate. If the work is exposed to excessive light for long periods, the colors may fade and the paper may become weaker. That is why some museums display particularly sensitive works for only limited periods. Then they return them to dark storage. The artwork rests. The public may not see it again for months or even years. This can seem frustrating. You travel a long distance to see a masterpiece. You arrive at the museum, and the artwork is not there. But the reason may be surprisingly simple. The museum is trying to make sure that future generations can see it too. Think about a painting created 500 years ago. It has already survived centuries. The museum may want it to survive another 500. That requires thinking very differently about time. A museum cannot protect a masterpiece only for today's visitors. It has to protect it for people who have not even been born yet. This is why museums sometimes rotate artworks. One painting may be displayed for several months. Then it is replaced by another. The first painting returns to controlled storage. This gives it a period away from exhibition lighting. In some museums, particularly sensitive works may be shown under very low light levels. Visitors sometimes complain that the gallery is too dark. But that darkness may actually be part of the conservation strategy. There is another problem. Light does not affect every color equally. Some pigments are extremely stable. Others are much more sensitive. Two colors sitting next to each other on the same painting can age differently. A brilliant red may gradually become dull. A delicate blue may change. A pale watercolor may lose its intensity. The painting can slowly become something different from what the artist originally created. And once the change becomes obvious, it may already be too late. This is why museums measure something called light exposure. They don't simply ask how bright the room is today. They also consider how much total light an artwork receives over time. Imagine sunlight shining through a window. 1 minute of sunlight does very little, but thousands of hours of sunlight can transform materials. Museum conservation works on the same principle. Small amounts of exposure accumulate. The damage may be invisible today, but it can become significant after years or decades. Museums therefore use special lighting systems. They can reduce ultraviolet radiation. They can control brightness. They can use sensors that adjust lighting depending on the environment. Some galleries even use motion sensors. When nobody is nearby, the lights become dimmer. When visitors approach, the lighting increases. The artwork receives less total exposure while visitors can still see it. It is an elegant compromise. Technology protects the art without completely hiding it from the public. But light is not the only reason museums keep objects in darkness. Temperature and humidity matter too. A museum must carefully control the environment surrounding a painting. Too much moisture can encourage mold. Too little moisture can make some materials brittle. Changes in humidity can cause canvas, wood, paper, and other materials to expand and contract. Over many years, repeated movement can contribute to cracks and structural problems. So the museum gallery may look calm, but behind the scenes, an enormous amount of technology is constantly working. Sensors measure environmental conditions. Alarms detect changes. Conservators monitor artworks. Storage rooms are carefully controlled. And sometimes, the most important conservation work is invisible. Nothing is being repaired. Nothing is being cleaned. Nothing is being changed. The museum is simply preventing damage from happening. This can be difficult for the public to understand. We tend to notice action. We notice restoration. We notice cleaning. We notice a painting being moved. But conservation often succeeds by preventing something from happening in the first place. A painting that remains stable for another 50 years may represent a huge conservation success, even if nobody ever notices. And there is something almost poetic about that. A museum may deliberately keep a masterpiece in the dark so that someday, someone else can see it in the light. The visitor standing in front of the artwork today is only one person in a very long line. Before them came generations of viewers. After them will come generations we cannot imagine. The museum is responsible for all of them. So the next time you enter a museum and notice that a gallery feels unusually dark, look at the artwork differently. That darkness may not be a limitation. It may be protection. The dim light, the filtered windows, the carefully controlled lamps, the limited exhibition time. All of it may be part of an invisible shield surrounding the masterpiece. Because art does not simply disappear when it is stolen or destroyed. Sometimes it disappears slowly. A color fades. A paper weakens. A photograph loses its detail. A textile becomes fragile. And nobody notices until the original is already gone. That is why museums sometimes choose darkness. Not because they want to hide the art, but because they want the art to remain. Today, tomorrow, and hundreds of years from now. Gallery Experience Hidden Stories Behind Art. Episode 11. Why Museums Keep Some Masterpieces in the Dark.